When you talk about bumping a player, it's pretty much
great courage. One that says the bump is dead, that's how you deliver it.
What is going on, YouTube universe? My name is Trent and welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football. And today, now that we have finally caught back up, we're diving back into another edition of the Round Recap podcast, where we're going to recap all the action from round 18 of the 2024 AFL season, which unfortunately, just like round 17, has been shrouded in controversy that has seen a detrimental fallout, I feel, and it is still a conversation point that is being had deep into, the beginning of round 19, and I feel this is going to be a discussion point that's going to be had for the rest of the season. It might even spill out into the off-season, into next year's pre-season, and I don't think things are going to change until the AFL are willing to accept they have made a mistake and they're willing to put preventive measures in place to make sure shit like this doesn't happen again. And we once again, unfortunately, are talking about the state of the umpiring for this year. It has been simply outstanding in a negative way, and not only are we seeing the game adjudicated so poorly, but it's the off-field decisions when it comes to the MRO and the tribunal and suspending players that is really getting people up in arms. And that is what our main focal point is going to be this week. We'll get into each individual outcome when it comes to the matches in question, but we have had a couple of players this week suspended initially for, I wouldn't say dangerous tackles, but tackles that have resulted in injury. We saw Toby Bedford from GWS suspended for a tackle on Tim Taranto, which left him severely concussed. And we saw a suspension from Charlie Cameron of Brisbane against Liam Duggan, which again resulted in concussion, as well as Alex Davies from Gold Coast for front-on contact against a Port Adelaide opponent. I think it might have been Lockie Jones, if I do recall correctly, which got a bigger ban than the first two mentioned. And then, in comparison, a drive-by king hit, and I say king hit because I still very much don't like using that word, but a lot of people have come out saying that is essentially a coward's punch or a coward's hit, if you have a look at that kind of contact in isolation, which gets a far minimal suspension compared to the others. And it really puts into perspective how far and beyond the MRO's grasp on the game has fallen away. And it's fucking frustrating. We'll get to those points when it comes, but round 18 provided some brilliant matchups, and some matchups that are starting to truly help shape how the final 8 is going to look. And at this point in the season, normally the ladder is done and dusted, apart from where we're going to see teams finish in that configuration, but we still have a top 8 that is still wide open to a number of teams that currently sit outside of it, and 2 teams that are still quite fighting for jostling in that position kicked off round 18 on Friday night at the MCG. Collingwood hosting Geelong. And again, 2 teams that have been on the opposite spectrum. We have Collingwood, who started off the season so incredibly poorly, but have managed to scrap and claw through injury after injury to finally get themselves back into a position where they're competing for a top 8 finish. And Geelong, who started the year off with that incredible undefeated streak that everybody was lauding, including myself. I made the very brash comment at the time saying it is very hard to see Geelong missing the top 4 from this period in time. Unfortunately, when they started losing and built a loss streak that saw them drop out of not only the top 4, but at times drop out of that top 8 contention. They're back within top 4 after a 20-point win against Collingwood, and question marks are now starting to pop up for either side. With Geelong, can they play this kind of football sustainably enough to not only finish in the top 4 but be a premiership threat? And with Collingwood, have they fallen off defensively too far to claim a top 8 spot this year? And round 19 this coming weekend has a couple of matchups that I feel is going to be doom or gloom for teams like Collingwood. You either win or you're out of contention, and that's the crunch that we are currently coming to. This game was the perfect way to kick off a round of football with two teams playing for individually a lot on the line, but collectively a lot on the line as well. At quarter time, Geelong was behind by a very slim margin. We had 4 goals 529, played 3 goals 523, 1 goal either side. Halftime saw Collingwood trailing 6 goals 844 to 7 goals 648. And then even at 3/4 time, Collingwood 8 goals 1058 trailed Geelong's 10 goals 969. Ha! It was the tail of the final quarter, and it was a breakdown on 2 different ends of the ground for Collingwood. We know defensively they have struggled. I've said in numerous podcasts here that I feel the loss of Nathan Murphy has been incredibly understated for Collingwood in the way that players for this team, and they even mentioned it on the commentary team for this game on the night given, Isaac Heeney has not had a season that is replicable by the 2023 standard that he set for himself. He's had to play a much different role. Darcy Moore, shadow of his 2023 self, he's had to play a different role. Young kids like Charlie Dean, thrown to the Wolves, has been finding his feet, but hasn't been able to fill that Nathan Murphy mould. And players kind of having to play different roles and taking away Darcy Moore's ability to be third man up to intercept, or Isaac Heeney having to be more of a lockdown defender instead of that run and dash kind of carrying, ball moving player. It's really hindered Collingwood's defensive structure. And when you look at the other end of the ground, they've been hampered even more. Raffle off a few names. Brody Myercheck, in and out due to injury this year. Yet again, sustains an injury out of, it was either this game or the week before, that is going to see him sidelined for the rest of the year. So they can't rely on their main scoring avenue this season to get them over the line anymore. Jamie Elliott comes back into the lineup and looked fit and firing, and it's great to see him at that level. But again, he's been a player in and out due to injury. We haven't seen Mason Cox for a long period of time, and as much as I've ridden the shit out of him, his absence with this Collingwood team has been glaring. Daniel McStay, finally fit enough, and I feel even though he played VFL for round 18, they should have brought him in. And I feel he could have been a difference maker off his own boot. Now, I'm not saying he's going to make up 20 points on his own, but the amount of time and opportunity that Collingwood had to bring that ball forward half, and they were lacking that tall key forward presence to either clunk it in a marking contest or at least bring it to ground, was a deciding factor in this game. And Daniel McStay is one of those players who has a great pair of hands on him. I'm not saying that he's going to be kicking accurately at goal, because we know sometimes Daniel McStay historically has been a little bit wayward with score shots. But the ability to be able to still make a contest, bring it to ground for the smaller players to crumb the ball, they've been lacking that severely. I don't know, you could just flip a coin, I feel, as to where the breakdown happened. And obviously Geelong have been priding themselves, especially on this new kind of defensive roles that we've been seeing players like Max Holmes have, for example, Tom Stewart getting a little bit more midfield minutes. They're all really relishing the ability to be able to get easy rebound work because of the lack of Collingwood forward presence, to get that ball back out and set up their own forwards. And the fact that Max Holmes plays as a defensive halfback but can still go forward to the ball and hit the scoreboard really acted as a damaging outlet for Geelong. Lawson Humphreys, a rookie that's only played a handful of games, comes out of this game having taken 13 defensive marks. He was huge, and this is a kid who isn't the biggest bodied kid on the field, but found himself in the right position because Collingwood would move the ball forward and he was able to chop it off because there was nobody there to mark the ball or bring it down to a contest forward half of the ball. You still had the usual suspects in Nick Dacos, 32 disposals, 71%, 11 clearances, 6 score involvements, still doing his thing, but not being able to be damaging enough, I feel, outside of maybe a quarter of play. Still, Sidebottom had 28 disposals at 75%, didn't have a clearance for the game, didn't get much in the way of being able to move into damaging positions. He hit the scoreboard once, but he didn't really have an influence in getting involved in goal assists and score involvements as much as we're used to seeing him hit. And then outside of that, Jordan De Goey has 26, but he runs at 50%. Then after that, we've got Josh Dacos, who had it 23 times, but he only ran at 65%. The ruckman Darcy Cameron runs at 44%. It's a real drop-off for Collingwood, who we have known historically coming out of last year as the benchmark of the competition. A lot of people coming into this year, including myself, expected so much more. And I feel even if they did have a forward structure in place, if they had Mason Cox, if they had Dan McStay, if they had Myercheck, I still feel maybe we would still be having a conversation about their defensive breakdown, because I do feel defensively they have been let down severely this year, and through injury we can't really point the finger as that being the blame, because they haven't been hit really hard at that side of the field. It's been more so the forward half of the ball and some midfielders. It hasn't really been the defensive core. They've still had that at their disposal. I don't know. I don't know where we draw the line, but Geelong just have players lining up and some shining lights over the last couple of weeks. I mean, Sam de Koning goes from being a premiership defender in his second, third year to coming in and now having to play a ruck role when they do have a ruckman available, don't get me wrong, but he has been really finding his footing in this position, and I don't know whether he will now be rebranded as Geelong's new ruckman. He has 22 disposals. He might have ran at only 50%, but he had a handful of clearances, clunked some marks, 7 score involvements around the ground. Lawson Humphreys, as I said, 13 marks for a kid that was only in his third game, or even his second game. It's only his second or third outing. Absolutely huge. Mitch Duncan, down on the number of disposals he had. He only had the 17, but he ran at 94% and he clucked 9 marks. He lays 3 tackles, 4 score involvements. Oliver Dempsey, 17 disposals at 88%. He has 10 marks for the game, lays 4 tackles, 7 score involvements. The key combination of young and old for Geelong really sticking thick and thin this year and standing tall in clutch moments has been the deciding factor in Geelong being able to turn their season around and get back to the position where they're at. As I mentioned though, we now have Geelong sitting in a top 4 position, and they're probably looking to solidify that with the run home that they've got. On the flip side, Collingwood now finding themselves in precarious positions that could see them miss the 8 completely if they don't start getting wins on the board. That's where we're at this year. And to think a team that was so dominant last year is now on the borderline of maybe not playing finals at all the year after, I didn't see this drop-off happening. And despite injury, I still think there are some glaring issues that need to be looked at. I don't know, that's just me. Feel free to comment down below. With all that being said, it is time to get my votes in for this game for the Hip and Shoulder MVP award for the 2024 season. And if this is the first podcast you were catching here on the channel, the way the MVP award works is it's a 3-2-1 vote system, just like the Brownlow medal. I decide, based on my own personal opinion, based off of stats, who the best 3 players were, and at the end of the season, whoever has the most amount of votes at the end wins the MVP award. An invisible award that they'll never know about, they'll never give a fuck about, but gives us an opportunity to discuss about who we feel was best on, whether you agree or disagree with my decisions. Comment section down below is always open, so feel free to let me know if I'm doing things right, because I know from my own personal reflection, I have fumbled the ball a little bit some weeks. So for this particular game, as I said, there were a few players that were probably in the mix. I mean, Nick Dacos, I feel definitely could have been voted for this week. I didn't give him a vote though. I thought he wasn't as impactful in the game. He had probably a period in the third quarter where he was dominant, but he wasn't really cited outside of that. Similar with Steele Sidebottom, he had moments, but he wasn't really as impactful as we are used to seeing. The one vote I gave to Lawson Humphreys, the rookie. Now, when you have a look at his stats, for a kid that's in his third game against the reigning premiers, I thought he had a great outing. 23 disposals at 95% disposal efficiency, 343 metres gained, 13 marks, 4 score involvements, only laid the 1 tackle, but the fact that he had 95% disposal efficiency, and of his 23 possessions, 19 of those were kicks. So it's not like he was racking up the ball and getting cheap sideways handballs or, short little 1-2s to kind of build numbers. He was marking the ball and he was hitting darts all around the field. And to have a game like this, I feel sets up a young kid so incredibly well, because this is going to give him a lot of momentum moving forward. And I really love the look of this kid. The 2 vote this week, I gave to Brian Myers. Good old Brian Myers. 27 possessions at 77% disposal efficiency. 12 of those were contested. 356 metres gained. 5 clearances, 7 marks, 1 goal, 9 score involvements, and 4 tackles. And best on ground on the night, Max Holmes. 27 disposals at 81%. 2 of those were contested. He had a lot of outside ball this week. 511 metres gained, 2 clearances, 9 marks, 4 score involvements, and 3 tackles. Just pops up at the right time. And the intercept marks that he takes and the run and carry that he presents for this Geelong backline really sets up a lot of their rebound work. And the fact that he can go forward of the ball and be offensively threatening just by foot, by hand, being able to bring teammates into the game, I reckon he'd be leading their best and fairest this year quite comfortably. Down at Tasmania Saturday afternoon, we had Hawthorn hosting Fremantle in a game that came down to the wire. It was a seesaw affair, and although I had hopes that Fremantle could go down to Tassie and get the job done, Hawthorn continued to put on an impressive showing like they have over the last couple of months and remain well and truly in contention for a top 8 finish. Losing this game took Freo from second spot out of the top 4. There's a lot on the line in these games. The season is so far wide open for many teams outside of Sydney, because Sydney have a 3-game buffer, that the top 4 hasn't even solidified itself yet. Top 1, yeah, okay, I don't think Sydney's going to drop that first spot. But from second right through to about maybe 13th, there's only a game or 2 separating each and every team. It is absolutely open season for a lot of people. Unfortunately, Richmond is the only team that can't mathematically make finals from this point in time. No shit, Sherlock. At quarter time, we saw Fremantle lead this game 3 goals 2 to 2 goals 3. Going into the halftime break, Hawthorn managed to wrestle it back 6 goals 6-42, playing 5 goals 5 at 35. 3-quarter time saw Fremantle rein it back in 9 goals 11-65, playing 8 goals 8-56. But it was a wayward goal-kicking display from Fremantle in the second half that I feel really cost them, because they went on for the remainder of the game from half-time to kick 5 goals 9. Hawthorn, on the flip side, went on to kick 7 goals 3. And to think Fremantle again have kicked themselves out of a game due to inaccuracy. This game was an arm wrestle from start to finish. You had Hawthorn just behind at quarter time, 2 goals 3-15, playing 3 goals 2-20. At halftime, Hawthorn managed to wrangle it back in, 6 goals 6-42, playing 5 goals 5-35. Then at 3-quarter time, Fremantle had managed to get it back again, 9 goals 11-65, playing 8 goals 8-56. But it was the inaccuracy an inability of the Fremantle forwards and Fremantle as a whole to convert their opportunities that let this slip out of their hands, because in the end, a more accurate Hawthorn runs away with a 13 goals 987 win over Fremantle's 10 goals 14 74, and it was a All-Australian defender that managed to turn forward temporarily to win the game. And to think that James Sicily kicked the winning goals and essentially got them over the line is absolutely huge. I wouldn't have expected coming into this game that James Sicily would be a match winner in that retrospect. We've come to expect huge intercept games from James Sicily defensively, and you could say Hawthorn have won games in the past due to his defensive work, but to say that they have won this game based off of James Sicily's offensive work, I reckon that's unheard of. You don't usually hear that, but unfortunately for Fremantle fans, that is exactly the case. And yet again, we find ourselves in a precarious position where Fremantle, wayward in front of goal, have kicked themselves out of a game that they should have possibly won, especially given the fact that in that second half, they went on to kick, I think it was something like 5 goals 9, comparatively to 7 goals 5. Yeah, I don't understand. And we said this about Fremantle in last week's podcast, which went out yesterday because of the delay, but enough of that. We've spoken plenty of times about Fremantle's inaccuracy in front of goal and how it's going to cost games, and the seesawing affair that has been their 2024 season continues. We see the best of Fremantle, which shows us a top 4 prospect, a premiership threat even, for those of you that care to laugh at that comment. But then the inconsistencies of being able to follow through leave us wondering whether they're even going to play finals, and they're still in a position where they could miss the top 8 completely after showcasing that their best is some of the best in the competition. Again, tail of the tape, point to make of this episode. This season is still wide open to the fact that we could see some very good teams miss out if they are not good enough and they fail to win the games that they need to win. When you turn attention to the stats of this game and you look at the top 20 performing players on the day, 12 of those players came from Fremantle. Everything about this game had Fremantle written all over it. The fact that they started off strong, they only went in at halftime by a deficit, they came back strong in the third, really set them up for a really big finish in the last, and they should have put Hawthorn to the sword. But Hawthorn this year have shown a resilience that we haven't seen from them in such a long time, and again managed to get not only another win but keep the door open for a finals berth themselves. It's a huge year this year, and it is a year full of surprises, both on a positive and negative end of the spectrum. Hawthorn have definitely been on that positive end. If you're a Hawthorn fan, I do not blame you for being up and about, because they're having an incredible year. There wasn't really anything else to report out of this game apart from the fact that James Sicily, defender turned forward, just blew my fucking mind. When trying to work out the votes for this game, the one vote was particularly hard because there were a handful of players you could have raffled off. James Worpel, Andrew Brayshaw, Connor Nash, Carl Amon, Hayden Young even, Luke Jackson, could have all been thrown in for a number of reasons, but I think the 3 I landed on were probably the 3 best on the day, and I would probably argue when it comes to the votes, these 3 names will probably be brought up in some configuration. The one vote this week I gave to Caleb Sarong. 22 disposals, 77% disposal efficiency, 13 contested at 374 metres gained, 7 clearances, 1 goal 1, 8 score involvements and 6 tackles. The 2 vote goes to the main man who I feel played the part of, Hawthorn's hero in this game, and that was James Sicily. Now, he only had 13 possessions. He ran at 84%. 4 of those were contested, 218 metres gained. As I said, though, Sam Mitchell making that switch, moving him from the defence to the forward line, resulted in 5 marks, 3 goals straight, 4 score involvements and 2 tackles. But it was the 3 goals he kicked that were monumental in turning this game on its head, especially the late goals he kicked in that final quarter that helped not only get Hawthorn in front, but the final of the three pretty much solidifying that they were going to win that game. Best on ground for me was Will Day. 24 disposals at 75%, 8 of those contested for 328 metres gained, 6 clearances, 3 marks, 8 score involvements and 4 tackles. SCG, Sydney, North Melbourne. At quarter time was a mind-blowing kind of predicament because North Melbourne played out of their skin and really took it to Sydney, and I thought, hang on a minute, are we in for another upset for Sydney? Is North Melbourne going to do the impossible and knock Sydney off in Sydney with the brand of football that they have been putting forth? Because we only saw Sydney take a 2-point lead in at quarter time, and North Melbourne, as I just said, really taking it to them. And then the game was dead at half-time. It was over at half-time. 10 goals, 10-70, played 4 goals, 4-28. For the rest of the game, Sydney went on to kick a further 10 goals, 8, and North Melbourne only managing 5 goals, 1. It was probably to be expected by many, and one of my closest friends is a North Melbourne supporter. Even he said this outcome was to be expected. Not just Sydney coming out and absolutely destroying a team, but North Melbourne kind of dropping off a little bit, and it's upsetting as a neutral to see, because I mentioned in the Round 17 podcast that North Melbourne have been stringing together a very impressive last couple of months, and that has been kind of all undone in one weekend, and I'm hoping it's not a loss that is going to kill any momentum or any newfound kind of hope or buzz that the kids at North Melbourne were starting to generate within one another, because this was a leading into this game, such an incredible patch for North Melbourne leading up to it. They might not have been getting all the results they have wanted, but they've been playing some really consistent football, and outside of the first quarter, it just mechanically fell apart. It's just 6 goals, they kicked 6 goals, 3 after quarter time. Sydney went on to kick 17 goals, 14? Absolutely dominant showing from Sydney, and I think this was a much needed demonstration for Sydney to come out after that close loss back-to-back Fremantle and St Kilda, to come out and turn around and say, we still are the team in charge, we still are the best team in the competition, all eyes on us, especially given they had this emphatic win without Isaac Heeney. They had that bullshit kind of going on off-field with Toby Green parodying the apology video from Isaac Heeney. I still think that was fucking hilarious, but, you know, there was a lot of talk about GWS versus Sydney in the media and everything else. There was a lot leading up to this game, and Sydney to just come out and say, you know what, fuck it, let's just get back to our systems and do what we do best. Fuck, they did that. Pretty straight up with the votes for this one. The 3-2-1 quite easy to determine, and I feel that these three probably in the mix for the Brownlow votes, I feel, as well. The only one that might be stiff to miss out of this one was Brodie Grundy. 20 disposals at 60%, 12 contested, 195 metres gained, given the fact that 12 of his 20 were handballs, 35 hit-outs, 3 clearances, 4 marks, 1 goal, 10 score involvements, and 6 tackles on the day. Tom Papley, however, gets the 1 vote, the little pap smear himself, the little bastard that everybody wants to punch in the face. 19 disposals, 63% disposal efficiency, 7 of those were contested, 486 metres gained, 3 clearances, 5 marks, 4 goals, 2, 8 score involvements, and 2 tackles. The 2 vote goes to Chad Warner. 31 disposals at 64%, 9 of those were contested, 638 metres gained, 3 clearances, 6 marks, 2 goals, 3, 14 score involvements, and 2 tackles. And best on ground, quite comfortably, Errol Goulden. 41 disposals at 65%, 13 contested, 738 metres gained, if you don't mind, 5 clearances, 8 marks, 2 behinds, 15 score involvements, and 3 tackles. Marvel Stadium, Saturday night, Bulldogs Carlton. Could this have been game of the round? Quite possibly, and this outcome could have been vastly different if Charlie Curnow had his kicking boots on, because we saw the Bulldogs knock Carlton off in what I thought was an upset defeat by 14 points. At quarter time, Carlton had a commanding lead, 3 goals 4-22, playing 7 behind 7. No surprise, the Bulldogs kicking themselves out of the game early. At half-time, however, the Bulldogs had managed to come back and make it a 3-point game their way. 7 goals 9-51, playing 7 goals 6-48. At three-quarter time, they extended that lead to 10 points, 11 goals 14-80, playing 10 goals 10-70. To finish the game off, they managed to kick a further 3 goals 2 to finish 100 even, and Carlton went on to kick 2 goals 4 to finish 86. There were some individual performances from Carlton that almost willed this game back into existence, especially off of the back of Patrick Cripps, who I thought was fucking huge, but it was efforts from players like Jamarra Ugle-Hagan, who arguably had a career-defining game. Hands down, the best game I've ever seen that kid play, that got the Dogs over the line. And I was already backing Carlton heading into this. Adam Treloar, a late out prior. You would have thought Carlton were going to come into this game and absolutely destroy them. I thought that. I was rudely fucking mistaken. But, as I mentioned about Charlie Curnow, this game could have been so different if Carlton were accurate, and it could have been purely off of this guy's boot. Charlie Curnow took 10 marks. He went on to kick 3 goals 7. 3 goals 7. Playing on Buku Kamis, who isn't a known key defender. He isn't even the size of a key defender. He is half the size of some of the key defenders out there in the competition. A lot of people are discrediting the effort that Buku Kamis put in on Charlie Curnow, given that Charlie kicked 3 goals 7. But Buku Kamis, I thought, held his ground against the 2-time Coleman medalist. It's just, I don't know, there were moments in this game where yet again, Charlie Curnow gets the ball and tries to do too much off his own boot. There was an instance where he could have chipped a ball off to the side to Elijah Hollins to set up an easy shot. He could have laced out Patrick Cripps running into an open goal, but the big man tries to do too much and he tries to be a hero, and it has potentially cost Carlton a win. 2 weeks in a row, we have seen Carlton fumble wins that they should have and could have walked away with. And now, even though I think they still sit in a top 4 position, given just points and how everything's fallen, do we see Carlton drop out of the top 4? Isn't it all possible? As I said, the story this whole video has been how wide open this season truly has become. And that doesn't disinclude Carlton's finish in the top 4, and it still leaves the door open for Bulldogs to play finals this year. These games are really starting to weigh up how this season is going to fall, and I am absolutely loving it. There was a tantalizing matchup between 2 marquee players of the competition, 2 names that have been thrown up for the Brownlow this year. Seeing Marcus Bontempelli go to Patrick Cripps in the last quarter when Patrick Cripps was starting to go on a bit of a hot streak was a matchup that I think a lot of people, neutral, Bulldog supporter, Carlton supporter, would have been very excited to see, and it didn't disappoint. They went toe-to-toe, head-to-head, and it was fucking fantastic. But at the end of the day, Bontempelli might have not had as big of an influence on the game as Patrick Cripps had, but the Bulldogs walk away with a big win. Who was best on ground? Well, if you've been listening, I have mentioned my 3-2-1 already, in no particular order, but we'll do them in order right now. The 1 vote I gave to Marcus Bontempelli, 20 disposals at 65%, 10 contested at 437 metres gained, 8 clearances, 2 marks, 1 goal 1, 7 score involvements, and 9 tackles. The 2 vote goes to Patrick Cripps. Now, I originally had him in the 3 vote here, but I ended up putting Jamarra Ugle-Hagan in the 3 vote. I'll explain why momentarily. But Patrick Cripps on the night ended on 28 disposals at 60%. 15 of those were contested for 550 metres gained, 11 clearances, 5 marks, 2 goals 1, 7 score involvements, and 8 tackles. But Jamarra Ugle-Hagan, again, deficient with the ball. I started saying efficiency was down, but deficiency is probably the word. Deficient with the ball, given he ran at 45%. I'm not including that efficiency in this calculation here because he still had 20 disposals. 10 of those were contested, 457 metres gained. He had 1 clearance, 6 marks, 4 goals, 3, 13 score involvements. Now, the fact that this guy was not only taking opportunity with both of his hands, but he was able to move the ball forward, bring his teammates into this game, and really have a monumental impact, especially with Aaron Norton out. Aaron Norton has arguably been the better of the two all year this year. Onus was on Jamarra Ugle-Hagan to stand up and stand tall, and I felt on the game itself was probably the most influential player on the field. And he might not have had the accuracy of somebody like a Patrick Cripps. He might not have had the same numbers as Patrick Cripps or a Bontempelli. He plays a different role. I'm not expecting him to have 30-odd disposals. But I thought on the night, he was the most influential. Adelaide Oval, Adelaide versus St Kilda, was wide open until three-quarter time. And it was a game where St Kilda fans probably would have thought that even though they were down at three-quarter time, the door was open for a huge final term. It was for Adelaide. At quarter time, Adelaide trailed 2 goals 1 to 3 goals 3. At halftime, they managed to stem the flow and take a 4-point lead, 5 goals 5 playing 4 goals 7. At three-quarter time, they were in front marginally by 8 points, 6 goals 10 playing 5 goals 8. In the final term, Adelaide went on to kick 4 goals 1. St Kilda went on to kick 1 behind, which is a reflection of what we saw St Kilda do against Port Adelaide. It blows my mind that we saw St Kilda only a couple of weeks ago kick a 100-plus score, and people then started saying, well, hang on a minute, St Kilda do have the team to kick a winning margin, to kick a big score. That has been thrown out with the baby, the bathwater, and every other bastard you want to catch in that bathroom, because I don't know where this breakdown happened. I'm pretty sure they did not have Max King in this game because Max King is out injured. I will just have to quickly go through the statistics to prove myself correct, and I am correct there. So question marks starting to pop up whether or not St Kilda need Max King in the forward line to kick a winning score, because the 5 goal kickers they did have, or the 5 goals that they generated at least for the game, let's see where they came from. Jack Higgins didn't kick a goal. Dan Butler didn't kick a goal. Who else? Cooper Sharman, he kicked 2. And we've come to expect Cooper Sharman to be a kind of spearhead for St Kilda when needed. Mason Wood kicked 2. And the final goal came from Mateus Philippou. Mason Wood has gone from wingman to forward out of necessity, and we know he can hit the scoreboard. But when you've got players in this team that are used to being kind of mentioned as known goal scorers and being able to impact forward half of the ball, yeah, that's a terrible outing, especially from the likes of Butler, Higgins, Mitch Owens, these type of players that are known for being threats up that half of the field. So, Max King's absence, is it going to harm St Kilda this year? I don't think St Kilda are in calculation anyway of playing finals, given the brand that they have been playing and the inconsistencies. And Adelaide, even though they're a mathematical chance, I don't think they're in the conversation either, really, because they're too farly inconsistent as well. But fuck, this was a boring game to watch in that last quarter. If you were a St Kilda fan or a neutral, if you're an Adelaide fan, you would have been licking your chops. But I just sat there thinking, is this all St Kilda's going to cough up? Like, we've seen impressive showings from St Kilda this year, and it's just few and far between when those impressive showings come. Then on the flip side with Adelaide, they put on a performance that kind of justifies maybe slightly that they could be in the conversation as a top 8 team, but the disparity between how good they are and how bad they are is just so glaring and too prominent in their game that just becomes frustrating. This was a game of frustration, so much so that we're just going to get into the votes for this one. The 3-2-1 easily come from Adelaide, and at three-quarter time I probably would have had a couple of St Kilda players in the mix, but given the way the game fell, given the output from these 3 particular players, I feel these players were pivotal in Adelaide skipping away with the contest when it was most needed in that final term. The one vote I'm giving to Jake Saligo. Down on efficiency, but when you look at the efficiency overall on this board, it is down. I mean, it is down. Rowan Marshall, 25%. Mateus Philippou, 50. Jack Sinclair, 60. Hunter Clark, 42. Ben Keys, 45. Jake Saligo ran at 48 with his 25 disposals. He had 9 contested at 339 metres gained, 3 clearances, 2 marks, 2 behinds, 3 score involvements, and 5 tackles. I thought it was the tackling pressure that he laid late in that game that really separated him from other players. There could have been some other players I could have thrown in here. Ben Keys could have very well slot in here with his 8 tackles ahead of Saligo's 5, but I thought Jake Saligo was a little bit more consistent throughout. The 2 vote goes to Jordan Dawson. Again, down on efficiency, 26 disposals at 57%. This was an ugly fucking game of football. 10 contested possessions, 562 metres gained, 5 clearances, 2 marks, 2 score involvements, and 9 tackles. But it was Rory Laird, who although had 31 at 48%, he had 11 contested, 378 metres gained, 7 clearances, 2 marks, 3 score involvements, but 13 tackles. An absolute pressure machine when it was needed, and probably a key point in the game as to when the game turned on its head and Adelaide skipped away with this win. I think the only biggest talking point to take out of this game, apart from how fucking ugly it was how Riley Thilthorpe came back into the game with little opportunity that he has had, kicking 2 goals straight, and just looked very physically imposing forward of the ball. The way that he's been able to bulk up in his absence and just the physical presence he had in that forward line tells me Adelaide might not need Taylor Walker in that forward 50 anymore, so we could be potentially seeing the end of Tex down in Adelaide. Saturday rounded out with a clash at the MCG with Melbourne taking on Essendon. Both teams much needing a win for 2 completely different reasons. Melbourne coming into this game with no Christian Petrarca, no Max Gawn, backs against the wall, underdogs very much, I felt, needing to manage to walk away with a win here to keep their top 8 chances well and truly alive. Essendon on the flip side, sitting in the top 4, yet to convince many people, including myself, that they can be a finals threat, let alone a premiership threat. Am I being too bullish? Maybe, but it was the same principle I set for them against Collingwood the week prior. They defeated Collingwood, gave myself a little sense of the fact that yes, okay, if they can win games like this consistently, this is a team that we can start having a proper conversation about. Still doesn't take away from the fact that the wins they have had have been against bottom 5 teams, doubling down against West Coast as well. They might have travelled a handful of times at the start of the year, but they've got to run home where they don't leave Melbourne at all. So they are obviously going to be at an advantage in that retrospect. But given that advantage, given the position they're in, they're going to probably want to lock themselves into a top 4 spot given their history come finals in recent years. And this was a game that they fumbled, and I still question how they lost this game. No Max Gawn, no Christian Petrarca, Melbourne's best, both of them, all Australian players. Max Gawn being noted as one of the best, if not the best ruckman, at least to have played the game in the modern era. He'll end his career as one of the best to have ever played the game in that position. I don't know how they didn't take advantage of those glaring outs, especially when you look at the statistical breakdown and how this game was kind of starting to fall. At quarter time, game was very much in the balance for both teams. Melbourne 3-2, Essendon 3-3. At halftime, Melbourne managed to skip away 6-6, playing 4-5, but it didn't rule Essendon out. We have seen Essendon come back from larger margins. 8-6 played 5-7, heading into 3-quarter time, 54 rather, playing 37. At 3-quarter time, it was 54 playing 37, and you're still at that point in time. Can't rule out a comeback. It is 3 goals the difference. Essendon have come back from worse. And then Melbourne just went fucking bananas and the floodgates opened. And Essendon had periods where, yes, they started to stem the flow back, but Melbourne would find a way to kick a goal to kind of break up that comeback. For Essendon, as much as you can talk about the players that stood tall and kept them in the hunt, the players that did fuck all are the ones that probably should be thrown under the bus here. I mean, Jake Stringer, he had 20 disposals. Okay, don't get me wrong. 20 at 55%, only kick one behind. This is a player that has been kicking 3-4 goals a game in most weeks. I don't know how he went unsighted the entire game. Peter Wright doesn't kick a score. 3 score involvements, gets subbed out of the game. I know it was raining, but leave him on the field to provide a contest, please. I don't fucking understand what they were doing. Nate Caddy, 10 disposals of 50%, only kicks a behind. Matt Guelphy, we're used to seeing hit the scoreboard. He doesn't hit the scoreboard at all. There were some glaring performances from Essendon that were real letdowns. But on the flip side, as I said, there were some Essendon players that well and truly kept them in the hunt. Dylan Shield, 6 tackles with a 28 disposal game. That's not at all to say Essendon didn't have players stand tall, because they did. I mean, Dylan Shield had 28, 6 tackles. Jordan Ridley had 29 with 10 marks. Zach Merritt had a better second half than he did a first half, but ran at 44%, and we're not used to seeing him play at that low of a percentage. Ben Mackay had some horror moments in this game. Sam Durham was a little bit down on his output as well. I don't know. It was just too far a gap between the better players and the players that didn't perform for Essendon, and I feel that's where it broke down. We're used to seeing a cohesive performance from Essendon when they win, and this was literally a performance from Essendon where it was individuals that you could pluck out. It wasn't a team win. And that's why when it comes to the breakdown of who I pick for best on ground, the 2 Essendon players, and yes, I am giving 2 sets of votes to Essendon players despite a 17-point loss here. When you see the 3 I've selected, it's easy to pick out of the bunch and say, yeah, okay, I think Trent's done the right thing here. I think he's onto something. The 1 vote I gave to Jai Caldwell, he had 23 at 69%, 7 contested at 340 metres gained, 3 clearances, 3 marks, 4 score involvements, but 12 tackles. In a close contest like this, defensive pressure is absolutely everything, and Jai Caldwell has been playing out of his fucking skin this year. He is a tackling machine, and in wet weather football, in close, tight-knit conditions, he really set the tone while Essendon was still well and truly in the hunt, and I couldn't go past giving him a vote this week. The 2 vote, I'm throwing it to Trent Rivers from Melbourne. 29 disposals at 51%. His efficiency probably let him down from getting the best on ground in this game. 13 contested, 460 metres gained, 8 clearances, 8 marks, 1 behind, 4 score involvements, and 7 tackles. But Nick Martin had somewhat of a fucking game here, and if it wasn't for this guy popping off in the last quarter, Essendon would have lost this game by 40 plus points. Nick Martin had 26 disposals at 84%, 6 contested at 402 metres gained, 9 marks, 4 goals straight, 9 score involvements, and 4 tackles. He was just everywhere in that last quarter. He was marking balls in the forward 50 and kicking goals. He was then out on the wing plucking marks. He was setting up teammates here and there. Very comprehensive game from him. The first of 3 games on Sunday kicked off at People's First Stadium with the Gold Coast hosting Port Adelaide. To no surprise, the Gold Coast keep their undefeated streak at People's First Stadium intact. The other streak, though, that I think is more glaring is their 0-7 streak when they have hit the road this year, and that could be the deciding factor come the end of the season, because out of the run home of the next 5 games, I think they have to travel 4 times. I could be mistaken, but that's going to be very tough for them given their inability to win away from People's First. Glaringly, on the other side of the track, Port Adelaide have been a team where historically we have seen them make prelims and be premiership threats up until that point in time and then drop off. They're now in a position where they could miss the top 8 completely, because yet again, as I've pointed out numerous times throughout today's podcast, the door and window for opportunity to play finals this year is still open to many teams that are vying for it. And if you're going to be wayward and you can't kick winning scores, and you put on a score line like kicking 2 goals 3 in a final term when the game is well and truly on the line and within your reach, I don't understand. They've got such a potent forward line when you look at it. Like, okay, Charlie Dixon and Jeremy Finlayson aren't the most star-studded key forwards, but they've got Mitch Georgiades, they've got Todd Marshall, they've got Smalls up forward as well. that are all great kicks on goal. They've got great sets of hands. They've got a good forward mix. They've got one of the best midfield cores in the competition. They have solidified their defensive structure. I don't know where the breakdown for Port Adelaide has happened this year, because I personally felt picking up Asava Radikalia, picking up Brandon Zirk-Thatcher, solidifying that back half, Horn Francis coming into another year as a Port Adelaide player, I really thought they were going to do some damage this year. I really did. I didn't see them finishing out of the top 4, I don't think, for a marginable period of time throughout the off-season leading into the year, and they have just proven so many people wrong with how they have played. The drop-off has been quite substantial. I think a lot of people predicted that the drop-off for Port Adelaide would have come, and I think when I did drop my predictions video, I did say I felt Port Adelaide might have been the team to drop out of the 8, but I didn't think it would be this glaringly clear to us. On the flip side, it looks like Gold Coast gave a fuck this week, and were fucking good enough, Damien Hardwick. Considering the week before, they weren't fucking good enough, apparently. But again, take them away from people's first, they really don't do much damage. So I don't know whether we can even have Gold Coast in a finals or premiership conversation right now. Probably we can more so with Port Adelaide, but they need to start being more consistent, because there's teams nipping at the heels. You'll see the ladder at the end of this video and how close it is, and if they don't want to start pulling the socks up, they'll be having a trip come September. The worst to come out of this game for Port Adelaide was the fact that Jeremy Finlayson has ended his season with a lacerated spleen. Ouch. That's going to hurt their forward structure somewhat. That's going to take one of their figureheads out. They're going to have to rely on somebody like an Ollie Lord potentially to come in to fill that gap. Gold Coast had 2 notable instances that have both hit the tribunal, one of which I felt should have been a hell of a lot more. But Malcolm Rosas got done for a week in an instance where he ran past a Port Adelaide player and elected to, and it wasn't even like a glance off a shoulder or anything, just ran past this bloke and with his elbow just decided, yep, I'm going to run past and bash you in the head with your elbow. What? And he got a week. He got a week for running past a Port Adelaide player who didn't see this hit coming, got blindsided by a blow to the side of the head, and he only gets a week suspension. I can't get my fucking head around it. I really can't, especially when the AFL are trying to take this hard stance against contact to the head and concussion protocols, especially when Alex Davies is coming into a contest, about to make body-on-body contact with Lockie Jones, drops the shoulder, makes head front-on contact, he gets rubbed out for 4 weeks for that contact. Now, you could argue, okay, he's come into a contest, drops the shoulder, collected a player high, he's going to miss weeks. Precedent has been set with that. But how can you set the standard and suspend one bloke for 4 weeks for a hip and shoulder to the head when a player deliberately runs past and throws a stray elbow that collects a player in the head, and yeah, we'll only give him a week? I'm internally struggling to tell you the true words I am feeling right now, and I think it is written all over my face and my body language and everything in between. This is part of what the AFL needs to fucking fix. Alex Davies tried to have his hearing overturned. It was unsuccessful. I don't know whether he's going to fight the charge, because I know Charlie Cameron and Toby Bedford, respectively, in the next 2 games had their charges upheld, and they're both fighting those charges. I haven't seen anything about Davies yet. I don't know whether they've just accepted those charges. With Rosas, I think they just accepted the 1 week, and they're probably lucky he only got that 1 week. I just don't understand how a deliberate elbow to the head only cops 1 week when Heeney's been rubbed out of a Brownlow for accidental head-high contact when he wasn't even looking at the player, and he copped a week as well. 2 glaring and different examples, but both cop the same outcome. I don't understand. 3-2-1 votes for this game. Let's get it out of the way because I'm getting riled up here. The 1 vote I gave to Sam Flanders, who I thought was a standout for Gold Coast on the day, and he's been a standout all season for them. 30 disposals at 80%. 8 of those were contested, 430 metres gained. 4 clearances, 3 marks, 1 goal, 11 score involvements, and 1 tackle. The 2 vote I gave to Zach Butters. 35 disposals at 77%, 6 contested at 554 metres gained, 1 clearance, 12 marks, 1 goal, 8 score involvements, and the 1 tackle. And best on ground, I gave to Noah Anderson. 29 disposals at 79%, 16 contested for 528 metres gained, 11 clearances, 3 marks, 1 goal won, 9 score involvements, and 5 tackles. I don't often like rushing through games like I just did with that one, but it just infuriates me with the state of the AFL this year. And it's not just the umpiring and the lack thereof in certain aspects, but as I said at the top of the video, it's the inconsistencies off-field with the MRO, with the tribunal, with the adjudication of just the league as a whole, with CEO Andrew Dillon coming out saying that the umpiring is as good as it's ever been and supporting decisions that are being made, and Laura Kane coming out and fucking doing what she's been doing. It's a fucking circus, and I said it in the last video and I'll say it again. The AFL will continue to be a circus while clowns are fucking running it, and I just don't understand when the Malcolm Rosas instance, and I didn't want to talk about it, but I'm still talking about it. The instance of Malcolm Rosas running past, making eye contact with this player, throwing a deliberate elbow which strikes a player in the side of the head. How can that only be graded and worth 1 week when we have seen players who have tackled another or accidentally made contact with another get worse or same thereof? It is fucking ridiculous. And I think Michael Christian, is that his name? That bastard at the MRO? They need to fuck him off. They should have fucked him off years ago. There needs to be an overhaul with the AFL. And I broke down internally when I found out Brendan Gale was not going to be Richmond's CEO anymore and he was going to move to Tasmania. That was a given when Tasmania was announced. But when he was in the running for CEO of the AFL, I really had hope he would win that position and he would take that role, because Andrew Dillon is within a group of the boys club, which some AFL supporters call it, of players that are just yes men for the AFL. They're all within a certain group. They're all well known within that AFL kind of core office unit, and they're just passing the buck to one another. One of them retires and moves on, the other one steps up into the role, and they do the exact same shit that their predecessor set before them. Brendan Gale would have come in and shaken the shit out of the AFL, because he is not a yes man. He is a man that gets shit done. He would have gotten the AFL in a much better position, and yet here we are, in arguably one of the worst seasons on and off the field we have seen in a very long time. The only thing that is going for the AFL this year, in my opinion, is the fact that finals is so wide open to a number of teams at this period in time, which I think is great for individual supporter bases. But as a whole, fuck, it has been a terrible year, and I don't think we're going to see any improvement unless they start saying that there is shit to improve on. They're just accepting mediocrity. They're accepting what we've got. They're accepting what we're being given and saying that it's fine. It's not fucking fine. I've had a breather. Let's move on. Sunday afternoon at the MCG, Richmond taking on GWS. I was optimistic that this could be a game Richmond could win, because GWS have had somewhat of a wavy season this year, as many teams within that kind of finals window have had. And for most part, even though we lost, I thought Richmond played incredibly well, and I actually come out of this game holding my head held very high. Down because we lost, yes, 24 points. There was a point in time where GWS got out to about 47 points, and it looked like, here we go, it's going to be a fucking 10-goal defeat here, and we've seen this happen with Richmond all season. But to only fall by 24 points when GWS had that momentum running, and Richmond just finding a way to scrap some late goals and still stay in the hunt, that hunger, that drive, it is what I feel, at least from my perspective as a Richmond supporter, we all want to see. Richmond are going to finish as a bottom 2 team this year. It's a matter of whether they're going to defeat North Melbourne and finish second last, or whether they're going to lose to North Melbourne and they finish last. I think that's very much how our season's going to be summed up moving forward. And out of that, I said it in the last video, you've got to try to take the small wins where you can. If you can pick and choose particular moments of a game where Richmond have won particular amounts of contests, or they've got statistics on the board that are better than GWS's, and you can say, hey, we did better in this area, we can hold our heads held high. We won the hitouts in this game. which Toby Nankervis, credit to him, he's having a huge year this year. We won the clearance battle. We won the centre clearance battle. We won the stoppages clearance battle. We won the contested possessions. We lost in uncontested possessions. We had one less turnover for the game. We had more inside 50s, but wasted opportunity. We had more kicks on the day. We had a little bit less disposals. But the fact of the matter is, this is 2 games in a row where Richmond, who is notorious for giving up so many centre clearances, and that's been the tail of the tape even through Richmond's premiership run. We would always let teams get off the chain in the middle of the ground, get the easy ball out. We've played Fremantle, who are arguably one of the better centre clearance teams in the comp this year, and defeated them in those stat lines. And we have defeated GWS in that stat line as well, who are no pushovers when it comes to their midfield setup and their crew around the ball. So Richmond can really hold their heads up high in the fact that within that midfield core, we're starting to find some cohesiveness. And I think as a Richmond supporter, that is great. We got the ball up forward. We know Richmond don't have a functioning forward line right now. We're playing Jacob Kajitsky, who I feel played the best game he has played for Richmond in this particular game, and that was great to see. Samson Ryan had opportunity, and I felt the little opportunity that he did have forward of the ball, he did quite well. We had some young kids really stand tall. I thought Hugo Ralphsmith had a really good game for us as well this game. Tom Brown in the defence just keeps going from strength to strength. And Steely Green pops up and kicks not only his first AFL goal, but kicks 3. And some people might argue that those were junk time goals because they all kind of happened in the last quarter. But one of those 3 goals brought us back to within a couple of kicks, and I started getting some hope that we were going to string a set of goals together and get the game back. To have a position of this game where we were down by so much and we came within a couple of kicks was exciting as a Richmond fan. And even though, as I said, we lost by 4 goals, I think we all collectively walk away with our heads held high. I really do. This is I don't like using the terminology of walking away without a win and being proud, but it's a loss that we can be proud of given the circumstances of how we played collectively as a unit. This could have been a blowout game. We kept fighting. We were better statistically in most areas. It was just the inability to connect forward of the ball because we don't have that connection there right now. But hey, once we get that connection back, who knows? Richmond could become a completely different beast, and that just gives me hope for the future. Looking at around the ground, the biggest moment that we want to talk about here, and this has caused the most controversy this week because it seems to be the most talked about issue, was the Toby Bedford tackle on Tim Taranto. Now, I'm still rather bullish on this because I still argue Bedford had locked up both arms, pinned both arms, Taranto's head's hit the ground, and he's been severely concussed. Not just concussed, but when he got up off the ground, he was well within a clearance situation, like a contested situation. The ball had been thrown up. He didn't even realize the ball had been thrown up. He was walking away from the contest, irregardless of all these players around him. And when walking down to the club rooms to get assessed, if it wasn't for having a handrail to step down those stairs, he would have fallen down those stairs. He needed every bit of help to get off the field and into those rooms as he could. It was a severe concussion off of what looked like very minimal contact. It didn't look like his head hit the ground too hard. But the fact of the matter is, I feel the precedent's been set. You pin the arms, head hits the ground, you should get weeks, unless your name's Patrick Dangerfield, in which case you get off. Toby Bedford gets slapped for 3 weeks. Now, a lot of people are talking about this. He fought the charge because they stuck with the charge at the tribunal. They gave him 3. He fought it, or he's fighting it now. I don't know whether it'll be overturned, but he tried to have it thrown out at the MRO. They said, no, you're getting the 3 weeks. He's now going to the appeals board. What might go in his favour is the amount of media that this tackle has garnered, media attention that is, the amount of media experts and journalists that are saying that this tackle being hit for 3 weeks is going to ruin the game of football. Don't get me wrong. I completely agree with the sentiment that if every tackle where a player's head hits the ground is going to cop them weeks, then it's going to have players second guessing whether they should tackle or not, and it's going to take that aspect out of the game, and I don't want to see that. But he pinned both arms, head hits the ground, precedence has been set. I don't know where you argue that, except for the fact that you could use Patrick Dangerfield's example of pinning both arms, driving Sam Walsh into the ground, head makes contact, and he got off. But I mean, he's the AFL Player Association chairman, and he's this and that for the AFL, and he's a special guest commentator for them, so they can't have a golden boy of the AFL go down. And this is where the conversation with Andrew Dillon being a yes man and one of the boys comes into play, because Patrick Dangerfield is already kind of in that mold, but as a player. And this is where social media blows up with instances like this, because you see players like Bedford cop weeks, players like Dangerfield, no case to answer. I still think as well part of this tackle involves the fact that Toby Bedford kind of drops his hip and tries to sink his body weight into the tackle. Some people will argue he needs to do that given the size difference between him and Taranto, and I get that, but hip drop tackles can be very dangerous, and that's why they rule against it in the NRL, who have completely different sets of rules when it comes to tackling and stuff compared to the AFL. Two different codes, don't get me wrong, but if one code that is more physically prominent with all their hits, especially their big hits, is acknowledging hip drops as something that shouldn't be going on, I feel the AFL should adapt that in some way, shape or form. That's going to get me dragged. I know that comment is going to get me thrown to the fucking wolves. He could argue a case for having the weeks drop down, and I feel 3 weeks is too harsh. He probably should have only copped 1 or 2. The impact that caused the concussion should be acted upon, because he did, by process of how he tackled, cause that issue. There could have been ways where he could have tackled that could have lessened the blow. He could have not pinned both arms, whatever the case. But yeah, it's a very hard topic and conversation point to talk about. I would love to know your comments down below on whether you thought Toby Bedford should have gotten 3 weeks or whether he should get off. But it's got the media in an absolute frenzy talking about it, and if it gets upheld, it's going to be a talking point for a very long time. 3-2-1 for this game, I felt was pretty straightforward, pretty clean cut. 3 GWS players all the way through, and while I know Jesse Hogan kicked 4 goals, I do not have him in the mix this week, because I feel outside of the 4 goals he kicked and where they were kind of placed, he didn't really have that much influence on the game. And I'm now not just going to give votes to players who kick bags. If they kick bags and they have influence and they're impactful throughout, yeah, sure. But if you kick 4 goals and then you're pretty quiet throughout the rest of the game, I mean, he had, what do you have? He had kicked the 4 goals, but let's see what else he did collectively outside of those 4 that he kicked. Out of the 4 goals, he had 5 score involvements, of which 4 were his own, and he had 10 possessions. So he didn't really do much else. He really didn't. And of the 4 goals he kicked, he took 4 marks. So he really didn't have much influence on the game outside of those 4 at all, and they all came at different times, some of which were kind of junk change goals in the end. The 3 votes I have given out, the 1 vote I'm giving to Kieran Briggs, which might come as a bit of a shock to some, but when you look at the stats this man had, I thought he had a really good game for GWS, given how dominant of a showing Toby Nankervis has had for Richmond over the last couple of months. Kieran Briggs had 15 disposals at 73%, 9 contested for 230 metres gained, 32 hitouts, 6 clearances, 3 marks, 1 goal, 5 score involvements, but laid 14 tackles for the game. As a big man, huge output. The 2 votes this week I'm giving to Lachie Whitfield, who might get the 3 votes for the Brownlow, but I think the 3 vote I gave is pretty straightforward. But Lachie Whitfield had 35 disposals at 82%, 5 contested for 385 metres gained, 1 clearance, 12 marks, 5 score involvements and 2 tackles. But best on ground, he could not be stopped forward of the ball, and it drove me fucking insane, was Toby Green. 17 disposals at 88% disposal efficiency, 7 contested possessions for 377 metres gained, 1 clearance, 4 marks, 4 goals straight, 10 score involvements and 4 tackles. That's the difference between where I feel he fell and where Hogan fell. Toby Green's goals came thick and thin early. I think he kicked 1 goal against the grain late, but still to be able to get his other teammates involved with 10 score involvements. He laid 4 tackles, he was up and around the ball, ran at a good efficiency. I thought he was well and truly in contention for best on for this game. The final game of the round, a lot of people probably would have thought was going to be a blowout, with Brisbane playing against West Coast at Optus Stadium. But after a demoralising loss against Melbourne the week prior, West Coast go back home in front of their home crowd and show an effort full of heart and fight, and only fall by 13 points. It shows how far West Coast have come, but it also shows to a certain degree Brisbane's kind of, I wouldn't say inability, but maybe their wavering form away from the Gabba kind of sneak into play here. And we know Brisbane have been one of those teams historically that dominate their home ground but suffer a little bit when they travel away, and that could have very well been the case here. But either side of this game, if either team were more accurate, it could have fallen either way as well. So to say that Brisbane could have won this by a much larger margin, West Coast could have even pinched this with some missed opportunity. But to end the week off with a game like this, when a lot of people would have expected West Coast to get absolutely smashed, as a neutral supporter, was a great way to wrap things up. Similarly to the GWS Richmond game, another talking point has come out of the Charlie Cameron suspension, where he has wrapped up Liam Duggan, and Liam Duggan has ended up concussed and subbed out of the game. But there is a huge difference between the pinning of the arms with Toby Bedford and Taranto's head hitting the ground versus Charlie Cameron. And Charlie Cameron, while he did pin both arms, he has kind of ran into Duggan and tackled him front on, so kind of like a bear hug, he's hugging him, and they've kind of fallen. Liam Duggan's fallen backwards, Charlie Cameron's landed on top of him, and Duggan's hit his head on the turf as he's fallen down. Now, Cameron got slapped with 3 weeks. He tried to argue that at the MRO. They upheld the 3-week ban. Brisbane are contesting that this week, so at this point in time, we do not know where it stands. I think it'll be later tonight, I believe, that it is had. By the time this video drops, it could have already very well been had. But he was trying to argue the case that his legs got tangled up with Duggan's and there was really not much they could do about it. But just like Toby Bedford, they argued that the arms were pinned. There could have been different ways he could have tackled. And I feel if they've already set the precedence with Toby Bedford's tackle, I knew straight away there was no chance that Cameron was going to get off, and vice versa. With Cameron getting his suspension and Toby Bedford, they work hand in hand. If one gets upheld, the other one's going to get upheld. They're either both going to get off, or both of them are going to not get off. I think that's where we're at right now, because both instances have ended in concussion. Both instances have players pinning both arms and tackles being executed. I don't know. Am I being too harsh? Let me know in the comments down below. Again, should Charlie Cameron have copped 3 weeks, or should he have walked? The memes obviously this week being that Charlie Cameron's good boy tax hasn't been paid because he hasn't been able to get off with good character like he did earlier with a similar tackle. They probably should have seen him get weeks. But that's where we're at. And that's where the conversation point has been out of this week. Instead of talking about teams contesting for finals and West Coast putting on a performance like this, unfortunately it's been about Toby Bedford shouldn't have been suspended. You know, Charlie Cameron shouldn't have been suspended. It's ruining the game. Our game's down the toilet. Jonathan Brown was pissed off. David King is pissed off. A lot of people are pissed off. 3-2-1 for this game, pretty straightforward. And again, when it comes to the votes for the Brownlow, I think these three are going to be the three very much mentioned. The one probably stiff here for me would be Josh Dunkley. He had 26 disposals, 8 contested, 4 clearances, 4 marks, 3 score involvements, and 5 tackles on the day. But the one vote I gave to Tim Kelly, who started the game off incredibly quiet, but finished the game off incredibly strong and stood up for West Coast when needed. 29 disposals at 72%, 6 contested for 506 metres gained, 3 clearances, 2 marks, 1 goal, 6 score involvements, and 3 tackles. The 2 vote I'm giving to Hugh McCluggage, down on efficiency because he had 32 at 53%, but he still had 10 contested for 575 metres gained, 3 clearances, 6 marks, 2 behinds, 5 score involvements, and 6 tackles. And best on ground, and I still feel making a very late charge for the Brownlow this year, is Lachie Neale. 34 disposals at 64%, 19 contested possessions for 481 metres gained, 13 clearances, 2 marks, 2 goals won, 10 score involvements, and 9 tackles. So at the end of round 18, this is where our ladder is currently situated. In first place, and I don't think at any risk of missing the top 4 at this particular point in time, is Sydney. Our top 4 is rounded out by Carlton, Geelong, and Brisbane, who are only a game ahead of Fremantle, Essendon, GWS, and Melbourne, who all round out the top 8, and with Port Adelaide sitting in 9th. They are only 2 games clear of the Western Bulldogs, the Gold Coast, Collingwood, and Hawthorn, who round out 10 to 13. 2 games separate second place and 13th place at this point of the season. This is where wins are crucial, and this is where low percentages could come back to bite you in the arse. Adelaide sit in 14th place, and the bottom 4, as it has been for a number of weeks now, is St Kilda, West Coast, North Melbourne, and Richmond. Round 18 has officially been recapped, but before we finish, it is time to have a look at the top 10 for the Hip and Shoulders MVP award after 18 rounds of football, and this is how we are looking ending this particular round. In equal 10th place on 15 votes, we have Jack Steele, Noah Anderson, and Isaac Rankin. In 9th place on 16 votes, we have Zach Butters and Sam Walsh. In 8th place on 17 votes, we have Adam Treloar. In 7th place on 18 votes, we have Errol Goulden. And in 6th place, equally on 21 votes, we have Marcus Bontempelli and Patrick Cripps. And I have said over the last couple of recent podcasts, I've been sleeping on Patrick Cripps this year. He should probably have an extra 5 votes easily. And I do apologise for that, baggers, if you're watching. But our top 5 sit as follows, and they aren't too far ahead of Bontempelli and Cripps. In 5th place on 23 votes, we have Caleb Sarong. In 4th place on 24 votes, we have Lockie Neal. In 3rd place on 25 votes, we have Nick Dacos. In 2nd place on 28 votes, we have Zach Merritt. And in 1st place on 31 votes, we have Isaac Heeney, who, if didn't have a hot start to the season, would have dropped off from that top position. But I felt he had too hot of a season at the start of the year to not be in calculations for at least 3s and 2s, which is why he is so far ahead, but he hasn't polled the last couple of games. So be very interesting to see how this rundown happens. If I'm a betting man looking at the Brownlow right now, I think Patrick Cripps and Lockie Neal are having the biggest run home currently and could potentially finish on a tie at the end of the year. I'm going to call maybe a draw between Cripps and Neal. Cripps to win his 2nd, Neal to win his 3rd. Am I on to something? Maybe? Who fucking knows? But that is it from me for another round recap podcast. I do hope you guys enjoyed. I fumbled the ball a little bit and stuttered my way through this one. I do apologise, but we got there. It just frustrates the fuck out of me when I, just like many, have such a deep passion and love for this game, and to see shit like the MRO and the tribunal and the adjudication of the game be so incredibly inconsistent and bullshit, it just puts a sour taste in my mouth. It really does, and I know I'm not the only one. So again, comment section is wide open. Do let me know how you feel about the state of the game currently. I think that's the best way to throw out a question of the day to you guys at home. What do you think the current state of the game is for the 2024 AFL season? Do leave a like on the video if you enjoy what I'm doing. You can hit that subscribe button to get on board the community we are building as well. And feel free to go check out any previous episodes that I have dropped for the Round Recap podcast. I would hugely appreciate it if you did so. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.